You're absolutely delusional if you think NASA would hire someone like you. My brother Marcus laughed, cutting into his perfectly grilled steak with surgical precision. The sound of the knife scraping against the plate echoed through Romano's Steakhouse, one of downtown Cleveland's most expensive restaurants. The mahogany walls were lined with photos of celebrities and local politicians, all smiling broadly as they shook hands with the owner. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Our table was positioned right in the center of the dining room, where everyone could see us. My family loved being seen, especially when they were celebrating what they considered important achievements. Tonight was supposed to be about Marcus's promotion to senior partner at his accounting firm, but somehow the conversation had inevitably turned to me and my unrealistic dreams. My sister Jessica leaned forward across the white tablecloth, her diamond engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandelier above us. Her voice carried that particular tone she'd perfected over the years, the one that sounded like concern but felt like condescension. Sarah, honey, you've been chasing this whole space fantasy for what, 12 years now? Maybe it's finally time to be realistic about your future. I sat there in my best navy blue interview suit, the one I'd purchased specifically for today's meeting. The fabric still carried the faint scent of rocket fuel and industrial cleaning solutions from the Johnson Space Center facility tour I'd completed just 4 hours earlier. The smell clung to everything at NASA. Your clothes, your hair, even your skin seemed to absorb it. It was the smell of dreams being built, of humanity reaching toward the stars. My family had no idea I'd just walked out of the most important interview of my entire life. I mean, let's be honest here, Marcus continued, gesturing with his fork. They only take real pilots from the Air Force or Navy. People with actual military experience and proven track records. Not some wannabe astronaut who's been watching too much Star Trek since she was 8 years old. My father barely looked up from his smartphone, where he was scrolling through stock prices and financial news. He'd worn his best suit tonight, too. The charcoal gray one he reserved for board meetings and family occasions he deemed sufficiently important. The statistics alone should tell you everything you need to know, Sarah. NASA accepts maybe 20 astronauts every few years out of thousands of applications. The odds are astronomical, if you'll pardon the pun. My mother nodded in agreement, adjusting her pearl necklace with perfectly manicured fingers. We're just worried about you, sweetheart. You're 32 years old. Don't you think it's time to consider a more traditional career path? Something stable? Something that would allow you to settle down, maybe start a family of your own? The waiter, a young man who couldn't have been more than 25, approached our table with obvious nervousness. He kept glancing around the restaurant as if he was looking for someone in particular. "Excuse me," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "Is there a Sarah Mitchell at this table?" My mother frowned, her face immediately shifting to that expression of mild annoyance she wore whenever something disrupted her carefully planned social scenarios. "Why would you need to know that? Is there some kind of problem with our reservation? Because I specifically requested the table by the window and—" The waiter held up his hand politely but firmly. "No, ma'am, there's no problem at all. It's just that." He turned to look directly at me, his eyes widening slightly with recognition. "Ma'am, you have an extremely urgent phone call from Houston, Texas. The caller said it was regarding your mission assignment and that it absolutely could not wait." The words hung in the air like a challenge. "Mission assignment, Houston." The waiter's voice seemed to echo in the sudden silence that had fallen over our table. That was the exact moment everything changed. The moment when 12 years of rejection, isolation, and family disappointment crystallized into a single perfect instant of vindication. The moment I'd been waiting for since I was 8 years old, lying on my back in our suburban Cleveland backyard, staring up at the infinite expanse of stars and dreaming of touching them with my own hands. My family's faces showed a progression of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and the first flickering signs of something that might have been recognition. But I wasn't ready to explain anything yet. I'd waited too long for this moment to rush through it. "I'll take the call in private," I said calmly, standing up and smoothing down my skirt. "Please continue with dinner. I'll be right back." As I walked away from the table, following the waiter toward the restaurant's private office, I could hear the urgent whispers starting behind me. But for the first time in over a decade, I didn't care what my family was saying about me. Because Houston was calling, and they weren't calling to reject me. I wasn't always the girl who made my family uncomfortable with my unconventional dreams and stubborn determination. Once upon a time, I was just Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, the youngest of 3 children in the tree-lined suburban neighborhood of Shaker Heights, Ohio. Our house was a pristine colonial with perfectly maintained landscaping, where appearances mattered more than anything else and family reputation was sacred. While my older siblings played acceptable childhood games, Marcus with his calculator and Jessica with her collection of fashion magazines, I spent my time building elaborate rocket ships from cardboard boxes, aluminum foil, and whatever electronic components I could salvage from broken household appliances. My bedroom walls were covered not with boy band posters or fashion spreads, but with detailed star charts, constellation maps, and photographs of space shuttles launching into the brilliant blue sky. My father, Robert Mitchell, worked as a senior executive at a major insurance company downtown. He wore expensive suits, drove a luxury sedan, and measured success solely in terms of salary figures and social status. My mother, Patricia, taught 4th grade at the local elementary school, but her real passion was maintaining our family's reputation in the community. She organized charity events, hosted dinner parties, and made sure we were always perfectly dressed for church on Sunday mornings. Marcus, 6 years older than me, had always been the golden child. Straight-A student, class president, varsity tennis player, and eventual valedictorian. He'd followed the prescribed path exactly as our parents had outlined. Prestigious university, business degree, internship at a respected firm, and steady climb up the corporate ladder. Jessica, 4 years my senior, had chosen the equally acceptable route of marketing and public relations, with a focus on eventually marrying well and raising the next generation of successful Mitchell children. But at 8 years old, everything changed for me during one pivotal moment that would define the rest of my life. I was sitting in our living room on a school night in June 1983, supposedly doing homework, when the television news showed live footage of Sally Ride blasting off aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. Something ignited in my chest as I watched that rocket disappear into the black void of space, something that would never burn out, no matter how many people tried to extinguish it. From that moment forward, I became obsessed. I devoured every book about space exploration our local library could provide. I memorized the names and mission details of every astronaut who had ever flown. I built model rockets in our garage, calculated orbital mechanics problems for entertainment, and spent countless hours at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History's planetarium, asking questions that made the staff uncomfortable. By high school, I was taking every advanced mathematics and science course the school offered. While my classmates were worried about prom dates and college parties, I was joining the robotics club, building my own telescope from scratch and spending weekend nights on our roof, mapping constellations and tracking satellite movements across the sky. The breaking point came during my senior year, on a crisp October evening when the leaves were just starting to turn. I announced at our usual family dinner that I had made my decision about the future. I was applying to the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, planning to become a military pilot, and eventually applying to NASA's astronaut program. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. My father slowly set down his wine glass and stared at me with the expression he usually reserved for particularly disappointing quarterly reports. My mother's face went pale, and she began nervously adjusting her pearl necklace, her telltale sign of extreme distress. "That's not realistic, Sarah," my father finally said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Women don't become astronauts. That's not how the world works. You need to think about practical career options that will actually provide you with security and stability." "But they do, Dad," I insisted, my voice rising with passion and frustration. "Christina Koch just spent nearly a year on the International Space Station. Jessica Meir conducted spacewalks. Anne McClain commanded missions. Women are absolutely astronauts now, and—" "Those are extremely rare exceptions," my mother interrupted, her teacher's voice cutting through my enthusiasm like a knife. "You're talking about maybe a handful of women out of hundreds of astronauts throughout history. You need to think about realistic careers that actually hire women regularly. What about teaching, like me? Or nursing? Or even something in business, like Marcus? Marcus, who had been quietly cutting his dinner throughout this exchange, finally looked up with a condescending smirk that I'll never forget. The final devastating blow came when I proudly showed them my acceptance letter to the Air Force Academy 3 months later. Instead of the celebration I had naively expected, I got what they called a family intervention. They sat me down in our formal living room, surrounded me on all sides, and proceeded to systematically explain why my dreams were not just unrealistic, but actively harmful to my future and embarrassing to our family's reputation. "You're humiliating us, Sarah," Jessica said, her voice cold and clinical. "When people ask what my little sister is planning to do with her life, I have to tell them she's playing astronaut. Do you have any idea how that makes us look?" That night, lying in my bed and staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to my ceiling years earlier, I made a decision that would define the next 15 years of my life. I was going to prove them wrong, even if it meant doing it completely alone, even if it cost me my family, and even if I failed spectacularly in the attempt. I was going to reach for the stars, with or without their support. The United States Air Force Academy was the first real test of my determination, and it nearly broke me in ways I never could have anticipated. The physical training was brutal. 6 a.m. formations in sub-zero Colorado weather, obstacle courses that left me bleeding and exhausted, survival exercises in the Rocky Mountains that pushed every limit I thought I had. But the physical challenges were nothing compared to the emotional isolation of being completely cut off from my family. They stopped calling after my first month. No care packages, no letters, no visits during Parents' Weekend when other cadets' families filled the campus with pride and support. I watched from my dormitory window as my classmates hugged their mothers and fathers, celebrated with their siblings, and shared their achievements with people who actually cared about their success. Meanwhile, I spent those weekends alone in my room, studying flight manuals and pretending I didn't care about the growing emptiness in my chest. The academic workload was relentless. Engineering courses, military strategy, aviation science, and leadership training, all while maintaining the rigid military discipline that governed every aspect of our daily lives. I threw myself into my studies with an almost desperate intensity, partly because I genuinely loved the material, but mostly because it was the only way to quiet the voice in my head that kept whispering, "Maybe they were right about you." Graduation came and went without a single member of my family in attendance. I walked across that stage as a newly commissioned second lieutenant, alone in a sea of celebrating families. Everything began to change during my 7th year as an Air Force pilot, when I was transferred to Edwards Air Force Base in California's Mojave Desert. Edwards was legendary among pilots, the home of Test Pilot School, the place where Chuck Yeager first broke the sound barrier, where experimental aircraft pushed the boundaries of what was possible in flight. It felt like a sign that maybe my luck was finally starting to turn. I was assigned to the 412th Test Wing, working on an experimental spacecraft project that was jointly funded by the Air Force and NASA. The project involved testing new heat shield materials and re-entry procedures for the next generation of space vehicles. For the first time in my career, I wasn't just flying. I was flying spacecraft prototypes, getting hands-on experience with the exact kind of technology I'd need to understand as an astronaut. The work was classified, cutting-edge, and absolutely fascinating. I spent my days in simulator cockpits that replicated spacecraft control systems, practicing emergency procedures for scenarios that might occur during launch, orbital flight, or re-entry. I worked with engineers who had designed components for the International Space Station, with mission planners who had coordinated space shuttle flights, and with test pilots who had flown vehicles that existed nowhere else on Earth. But the most important thing that happened at Edwards wasn't the technology or the training. It was meeting Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a former NASA astronaut who was working as a contractor on our experimental program. Elena had flown 3 space shuttle missions in the 1990s, including one as mission commander, and she had a reputation for being both brilliant and brutally honest about what it really took to succeed at NASA. She was the first person in years who looked at me and saw potential instead of delusion. After watching me handle a particularly difficult spacecraft simulation, one where multiple systems failed simultaneously and I had to improvise solutions while maintaining perfect flight control, she pulled me aside for a conversation that would change everything. "You have the instincts," she told me, her dark eyes serious and evaluating. "But more importantly, you have the hunger." That combination is what separates the dreamers from the actual space travelers. I've seen a lot. My 8th application to NASA was radically different from all the others. Instead of trying to hide my unconventional background, I embraced it completely. I wrote about loneliness, the family rejection, the years of doubt and persistence. I wrote about how those experiences had forged me into someone who could handle any challenge space might throw at me, because I'd already survived challenges that would have broken most people. I also had Elena's recommendation, along with testimonials from the engineers and test pilots I'd worked with at Edwards. For the first time, my application package included endorsements from people who actually knew what astronaut work was like, who could speak credibly about my potential to succeed in space. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, while I was in the middle of a routine test flight in one of our experimental vehicles. I was 50,000 feet above the Mojave Desert, running through a series of re-entry simulations, when my radio crackled to life with an unusual priority message. "Viper 27, you need to return to base immediately," the air traffic controller said, using my call sign. "Priority Alpha message from Houston, waiting in operations." Priority Alpha meant drop everything and respond immediately. In my 7 years of flying, I had never received a Priority Alpha message that wasn't related to a genuine emergency. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it over the aircraft's engine noise as I banked toward Edwards and began my descent. I landed that experimental aircraft with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Medical emergency? Family crisis? Some kind of security issue with my clearance? But a small, carefully suppressed part of my brain kept whispering the possibility I'd been dreaming about for over a decade. In the squadron commander's office, I opened a secure email with fingers that refused to stay steady. The sender was from Johnson Space Center. The subject line was simple and direct: NASA astronaut candidate selection, congratulations. The first line of the email was all I needed to read: "Captain Sarah E. Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a NASA astronaut candidate for the 2019 class." I made it. After 8 applications, 12 years of preparation, and more than a decade of family silence, I was finally going to space. Elena found me 20 minutes later, still sitting in that office, still staring at the computer screen with tears running down my cheeks. She didn't say anything, she just smiled and handed me a tissue. "Welcome to the club, astronaut," she said simply. For the first time in 15 years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The NASA Astronaut Candidate Training Program at Johnson Space Center in Houston was like entering an entirely different world, one where my dreams weren't considered unrealistic, but were shared by everyone around me. For 2 years, I lived and breathed space exploration alongside 19 other carefully selected individuals who had all sacrificed everything to reach this point. The training was more intensive than anything I'd experienced in the military. We learned to operate every system on the International Space Station, from life support and communications to the robotic arm and scientific equipment. We practiced spacewalks in the massive Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, a pool containing 6.2 million gallons of water where we could simulate the weightless environment of space while working on full-scale mock-ups of spacecraft and station components. Tal Ender. I excelled in the technical aspects of training, but what really set me apart was my ability to remain calm and focused during emergency simulations. Years of handling rejection and isolation had given me an unusual capacity for stress management. When trainers would throw multiple system failures at us simultaneously, trying to overwhelm our decision-making abilities, I found that I could maintain clarity and work through problems methodically, while others struggled with the pressure. My first assignment after completing astronaut candidate training was as a mission specialist on a 6-month rotation to the International Space Station. The launch itself was everything I had dreamed it would be: the incredible violence of rocket engines igniting, the crushing acceleration as we climbed through Earth's atmosphere, and then the sudden, perfect silence of orbital flight. For 6 months, I orbited Earth every 90 minutes, conducting dozens of scientific experiments, performing maintenance on station systems, and participating in 3 spacewalks that allowed me to work directly in the vacuum of space. During those spacewalks, floating 400 kilometers above Earth, with nothing but my spacesuit between me and the infinite black void, I finally understood what I had been reaching for all these years. The mission was flawless from a technical standpoint, but what really mattered was how I performed under the unique stresses of long-duration spaceflight. Living in a confined space with 5 other people for 6 months, dealing with the physical effects of weightlessness, and maintaining peak performance while conducting complex scientific work. These were the challenges that separated good astronauts from exceptional ones. When I returned to Earth, the media coverage was more extensive than I had expected. My story, the family rejection, the years of persistence, the unconventional path to space, resonated with people in ways that surprised everyone, including NASA's public relations team. I appeared on morning television shows, gave interviews to major magazines, and spoke at universities across the country about pursuing seemingly impossible dreams. But my family remained silent through all of it. Not a single congratulation, not even acknowledgement that their daughter had achieved something extraordinary. I would watch news coverage of my mission and wonder if they were seeing the same stories, if they had any reaction at all to learning that the daughter they'd written off was now being celebrated as a national hero. NASA promoted me to lead mission specialist after my first flight, recognizing my technical expertise and leadership capabilities. I was assigned to increasingly complex missions, including a crucial International Space Station assembly flight, where we installed new solar arrays and upgraded critical life support systems. The mission required 4 spacewalks over 2 weeks, and I served as the lead spacewalker, directing the installation of equipment that would support the station for years to come. 3 years after my first spaceflight, NASA selected me for the most prestigious assignment of my career, Mission Commander for the International Space Station Expedition 64, a 6-month mission that would involve coordination with Russian, European, Japanese, and Canadian space agencies. At 34 years old, I became the youngest woman ever selected to command an international space mission. The announcement was made at a NASA press conference that was broadcast live around the world. Standing at the podium in my NASA flight suit, with the agency's logo behind me and cameras recording every word, I felt the weight of every rejection, every lonely night, every family dinner where I'd been told I was living in a fantasy. Commander Mitchell, a reporter from CNN, asked during the question-and-answer session, "What does this historic appointment mean to you personally, especially given your unconventional path to NASA?" I looked directly into the camera that I knew would carry my words to millions of viewers around the world, including potentially my family. It means that sometimes the people who believe in you least end up giving you the greatest gift of all, the motivation to prove that their limitations aren't your limitations. It means that dreams that seem impossible to everyone else might just be the exact right size for you. The mission itself exceeded every expectation NASA had set for it. We successfully completed all major objectives weeks ahead of schedule, conducted 6 complex spacewalks, and achieved several important scientific breakthroughs that advanced our understanding of long-duration spaceflight. International media coverage called it a masterclass in space leadership and the future of international cooperation in space. When we returned to Earth after 6 months in orbit, I was promoted to Senior Mission Commander and offered a position as Director of Astronaut Training, responsible for preparing the next generation of space explorers. It was an honor that typically went to astronauts with decades of experience, but NASA recognized that my unique background and proven leadership abilities made me ideal for developing training programs that could identify and nurture the kind of resilience required for future deep space missions. I had achieved everything I'd ever dreamed of and more. I'd commanded international space missions, been featured on the covers of Time magazine and National Geographic, spoken at the World Economic Forum, and advised Congress on the future of American space exploration. Presidents had called to congratulate me, and world leaders sought my opinions on space policy. But success has a strange way of changing how people remember their own behavior, and it was about to change how my family remembered theirs. The phone call that would finally bring everything full circle came on a Wednesday evening in late spring, almost exactly 15 years after I'd last spoken to my family. I was in my office at Johnson Space Center, reviewing crew selection recommendations for the upcoming Artemis lunar missions, when my personal cell phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over a decade. Sarah? The voice was Jessica's, but it sounded different, artificially cheerful in a way that immediately made me suspicious. Oh my goodness, we've been trying to reach you for weeks. I can't believe how hard it is to get in touch with you these days. I set down the astronaut candidate files I'd been reviewing and leaned back in my chair. Jessica, it's been a long time. I know, and we feel terrible about that. Life just gets so busy, you know. But listen, Mom's 65th birthday is coming up next month, and we thought it would be absolutely wonderful to have the whole family together for once. It's been far too long. The casual tone, as if 15 years of silence was just an unfortunate oversight, was almost breathtaking in its audacity. But I found myself curious about what had prompted this sudden desire for reconciliation. Where were you thinking of having this celebration? Oh, we made reservations at Romano's Steakhouse downtown. You remember that place we used to go for special occasions? The one with the amazing wine cellar and the celebrity photos on the walls? It took Marcus weeks to get a reservation there. Apparently they're booked solid for months in advance now. Something in her tone triggered a memory. Romano's Steakhouse wasn't just any restaurant. It had become one of Cleveland's most exclusive dining establishments, the kind of place where business deals were made and political alliances were formed, the kind of place where being seen mattered almost as much as the food. How exactly did Marcus manage to get a reservation if they're booked so far in advance? I asked. Oh, you know Marcus. He's very well connected in the business community now. He knows someone who knows someone. He pulled some strings, called in a few favors. The usual networking magic. I almost smiled at that. Marcus had always been convinced that success was about who you knew rather than what you accomplished. The irony was perfect. Well, I said after a long pause, I suppose I could make time for that. When and what time? Saturday evening, 7:30. And Sarah? Her voice took on that concerned tone again. Maybe you could, dress nicely for once? This is Mom's 65th, and Romano's is a pretty upscale place. I know you're probably more comfortable in those military uniforms or whatever, but I'll dress appropriately, I interrupted. I'll see you Saturday. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out the window at the mock-up spacecraft in the courtyard below. Part of me was tempted to call back and cancel, to avoid what would inevitably be an awkward and potentially painful reunion. But another part of me, the part that had spent 15 years proving them wrong, was curious to see how this would play out. I arrived at Romano's 15 minutes early, not through any staff entrance or VIP treatment, but walking through the front door like any other customer. I wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, low heels, and a blazer that subtly bore the NASA pin I'd earned through 5 space missions. I looked professional, confident, and completely comfortable in one of Cleveland's most exclusive restaurants. The hostess greeted me with immediate recognition. "Commander Mitchell," she said, her face lighting up with genuine excitement. "What an absolute honor to have you dining with us tonight. I have to say, your documentary on the Discovery Channel last month was absolutely inspiring." "Thank you," I replied quietly. "I'm actually meeting family tonight, so I'd prefer to be treated just like any other guest." Of course. But if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. The entire staff knows who you are, and we're all incredibly proud to have you here." I could already hear familiar voices as I approached the table. My mother's clipped, precise tones as she critiqued the wine selection, my father's low rumble as he discussed stock market performance, Marcus's confident laughter as he told some story about his latest business success. Jessica's high-pitched giggle echoed off the restaurant's mahogany walls exactly the way it had 15 years ago. I paused just outside their field of vision, taking a moment to observe the family I hadn't seen in over a decade. They looked older, of course, but essentially unchanged. Same expensive clothes, same air of self-importance, same absolute certainty that their way of viewing the world was the only correct one. When I finally approached the table, the conversation stopped abruptly. For just a moment, all eyes focused on me with expressions that ranged from surprise to uncertainty to something that might have been guilt. Then my father's face settled into that familiar, patronizing smile I remembered so well. "Sarah," he said, shaking his head with obvious amusement. "You actually came. I have to admit, I wasn't entirely sure you'd show up. You really think you belong in a place like this?" I pulled out the empty chair they'd left for me and sat down calmly. "Good evening, everyone. Happy birthday, Mom?" My mother nodded stiffly, but I could see her eyes evaluating my appearance, looking for something to criticize. "You could have made more of an effort with your outfit, sweetheart. This is a very nice restaurant." "This is my version of formal," I replied, pouring myself water from the crystal pitcher. Marcus leaned forward with that smirk I remembered so well. "So, Sarah, are you still doing that whole military thing? Please tell me you've finally found something more stable by now. Something more practical." "I hope you can at least afford dinner here," my father added with what he clearly thought was good-natured teasing. "This place isn't exactly cheap. The wine list alone probably costs more than most people make in a month." I nodded politely and reached for my menu. No one asked how I'd been. No one said it was nice to see me. To them, I was still the delusional girl who had thrown away a perfectly good life to chase an impossible dream. They just didn't know yet how impossible that dream had turned out to be. The appetizers had just been served when everything changed. We'd ordered a selection of the restaurant's signature dishes, and the conversation had settled into the familiar rhythm of family gossip and business updates. My father was explaining some complex financial maneuver he'd orchestrated, Marcus was detailing his latest promotion, and Jessica was showing off photos from her recent vacation to Europe. That's when I noticed him approaching our table, a distinguished man in his 50s wearing an impeccably tailored suit, moving with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to managing high-profile clientele. He was the restaurant manager, and he was scanning our table with obvious purpose. "Excuse me," he said politely, his voice carrying the refined tone of someone who regularly served celebrities and politicians. "I'm looking for Commander Sarah Mitchell. Is she dining with us this evening?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. My father's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Marcus blinked in confusion. Jessica's champagne glass froze at her lips. "Commander?" my mother repeated slowly, as if the word was foreign to her. The manager's face broke into a warm, genuine smile when he spotted me. "Commander Mitchell, what an incredible honor to have you back with us. I have to tell you, the entire staff has been talking about your recent interview on 60 Minutes about the Artemis program. Absolutely fascinating insights into the future of lunar exploration." He turned to address my family with obvious pride. "I hope you all realize what an extraordinary privilege it is to be dining with one of NASA's most accomplished astronauts. Commander Mitchell has spent over 400 days in space across 5 separate missions. She's commanded 2 International Space Station expeditions and is currently leading the astronaut selection and training program for our return to the Moon." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the subtle hum of the restaurant's air conditioning system. Marcus had gone pale. Jessica was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. My father's wine glass was trembling slightly in his hand. "Commander Mitchell," the manager continued, clearly unaware of the family dynamics he was revealing, "your usual table in our private dining room is available if you'd prefer more privacy. We also have that special bottle of champagne you enjoyed during your celebration dinner after your last mission, the Dom Perignon 2010. Should I have the sommelier bring it over?" I smiled politely but shook my head. "Thank you, but this table is perfect, and we're fine with our current wine selection." "Of course. But please, if there's anything at all you need, don't hesitate to ask. The chef mentioned he'd be honored to prepare your favorite off-menu item if you're interested. The seared duck breast with the honey gastrique that he created specifically for your last visit." As the manager walked away, the table remained frozen in stunned silence. I calmly reached for my water glass and took a sip, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Commander?" Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. "Did he say NASA?" Marcus added, his usual confidence completely evaporated. My mother was blinking rapidly, a sure sign that her carefully constructed worldview was crashing down around her. "Sarah, what exactly is going on here?" I set down my water glass and looked around the table at the faces of people who had once been so certain about my limitations. "I'm an astronaut," I said simply. "I have been for the past 8 years. I've commanded international space missions, lived on the International Space Station for extended periods, and I'm currently responsible for training the next generation of space explorers." The words landed like physical blows. My father's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been recognition. Marcus was staring at me as if I'd revealed I could fly. Jessica looked like she was going to be sick. But how?" my mother stammered. "When did this happen? Why didn't we know?" I picked up my fork and calmly took a bite of my appetizer before answering. "It happened because I never stopped working toward it. Even after you made it clear you thought I was wasting my life. You didn't know because you stopped caring about what I was doing 15 years ago." "The newspaper articles," my father said suddenly, his voice hollow with realization. "The magazine covers. The news reports about NASA missions. Sarah Mitchell. I saw the name, but I never connected." "You never wanted to connect it," I corrected gently. It was easier to believe I was still the failure you'd written me off as, than to consider that maybe I'd actually achieved what I said I would achieve. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of composure. "Well, this is incredible, Sarah. We had no idea you'd become so successful. This changes everything." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Does it? Because I'm the same person I was when I walked in here an hour ago. I'm the same person I was when you told me I was delusional for wanting to be an astronaut. The only thing that's changed is that now you know other people think my life has value." The main courses arrived, providing a brief respite from the conversation, but I could feel the weight of their stares as they tried to process this new reality. The daughter they'd dismissed, the sister they'd been embarrassed by, the family member they'd erased from their lives. She was sitting across from them wearing a NASA pin, casually mentioning space missions as if they were routine business trips. "So you've been to space?" Jessica asked finally, her voice small and uncertain. 5 times, I replied. "Most recently as commander of a 6-month expedition to the International Space Station. We conducted dozens of scientific experiments, performed multiple spacewalks, and achieved several important milestones for future deep space exploration." "My God," my mother whispered, "my daughter is an astronaut." "Your daughter has always been an astronaut," I said quietly. "You just chose not to see it." The remainder of dinner passed in a surreal blend of awkward questions, stunned silences, and my family's increasingly desperate attempts to rewrite the history of our relationship. They wanted to know everything: my training, my missions, my current responsibilities at NASA, but their questions felt less like genuine interest and more like damage control, as if they were trying to figure out how to position themselves in relation to my success. "But why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked for the 3rd time, her voice carrying that wounded tone she used when she felt she'd been treated unfairly. "We're your family, Sarah. Don't you think we deserved to know about something this important?" I set down my fork and looked at her directly. "Tell you what, exactly? That I was selected for astronaut training? That I completed my first mission? That I was promoted to mission commander? That I've been featured on magazine covers and advised Congress on space policy? Which part of my success did you want me to share with people who had made it crystal clear they thought my dreams were embarrassing delusions?" "We didn't know you were actually going to succeed," Marcus said, then immediately realized how that sounded. "I mean, we knew you were talented, but the odds were so astronomical." "The odds were exactly what they were," I interrupted. "What you're really saying is that you only wanted to be part of my life if I achieved something impressive enough to reflect well on you. Your support was conditional on my success, meeting your standards of what was worthy." Jessica leaned forward, her eyes glistening with what might have been genuine remorse. "Sarah, we made mistakes. We can see that now. But we were trying to protect you from disappointment. We didn't want you to get hurt chasing something that seemed impossible." "No," I said firmly. "You were protecting yourselves from the embarrassment of having a daughter who didn't fit your narrow definition of success. You were more concerned about what other people would think than you were about supporting someone you claimed to love." The conversation continued for another hour, with my family cycling through various stages of justification, apology, and attempts to position themselves as having always believed in me, deep down. They wanted to know about my current projects, my future missions, whether I'd be interested in bringing them to NASA events or introducing them to other astronauts. I'm actually leading the astronaut selection process for the Artemis program, I explained when they asked about my current work. We're choosing the crew that will return humans to the lunar surface for the first time since 1972. It's arguably the most important mission in NASA's history, and I'm responsible for ensuring we select individuals who have both the technical capabilities and the psychological resilience required for deep space exploration. My father's business instincts kicked in immediately. That must put you in contact with some very influential people. Government officials, aerospace executives, International Space Agency leaders. Have you thought about leveraging those connections for consulting opportunities? I could help you set up meetings with some of my clients who have interests in the aerospace sector. The offer was so perfectly characteristic of him that I almost laughed. Even now, faced with evidence of my success that he couldn't ignore, his first instinct was to figure out how to monetize it, how to turn my achievements into networking opportunities that could benefit him. I'm not interested in leveraging my NASA connections for personal gain, I replied. My focus is on advancing human space exploration, not on building a business network. As we finished dessert and the evening began winding down, the conversation turned to future plans. Jessica mentioned her upcoming wedding, Marcus talked about his promotion to managing partner, and my parents discussed their retirement travel plans. It was clear they expected me to slot back into the family dynamic as if nothing had changed, as if 15 years of silence could be erased by a single dinner conversation. So what does this mean for us going forward? Jessica asked as we waited for the check. I mean, I'd love for you to be involved in my wedding planning. And maybe you could bring someone from NASA as your plus one? It would be so exciting to have a real astronaut at the ceremony. I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA but had never shared my dreams, who wanted to celebrate my success without acknowledging their role in making the journey unnecessarily difficult. If we're going to have any kind of relationship going forward, it needs to be built on honesty, I said. That means acknowledging what actually happened between us, not pretending it was all some kind of misunderstanding. What do you mean? My mother asked. I mean that you cut me out of your lives because I chose a path you didn't approve of. You weren't protecting me from disappointment. You were protecting yourselves from association with what you saw as failure. You don't get to rewrite that history just because the outcome turned out to be something you can brag about. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Look, Sarah, we all made mistakes. You made choices, I corrected. Deliberate, conscious choices to prioritize your comfort and social standing over supporting a family member's dreams. Those weren't mistakes. They were values in action. The table fell quiet. For the first time all evening, they seemed to understand that this wasn't going to be a simple reconciliation where everyone hugged and moved forward as if nothing had happened. So what do you want from us? My father asked finally. I want honesty, I replied. I want acknowledgement of what actually happened and why. I want you to understand that my success doesn't vindicate your behavior. It highlights how wrong you were. And if you want to be part of my life going forward, I need to know that you understand the difference. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. We do understand. And we're sorry. We're genuinely, deeply sorry for not supporting you when you needed us most. I'm not looking for apologies, I said gently. I'm looking for evidence that you've learned something from this experience, that you understand why your conditional love was so damaging, and that you're committed to doing better. The check arrived, and my father reached for it automatically, but I intercepted it smoothly. This one's on me, I said. NASA pays quite well, and I've had plenty of time to save money, given that I've been too busy achieving impossible dreams to spend much on entertainment. As we gathered our things to leave, Jessica approached me hesitantly. Sarah, I know we have a lot to work through, but I really would love to have you at my wedding. Not as some kind of trophy or conversation piece, but because you're my sister, and I've missed you more than you know. I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd learned to expect from my family, but what I saw there looked like genuine regret and hope. Send me the details, I said finally. I'll see if I can make it work with my mission schedule. And maybe, she added hopefully, you could tell me more about what you do? I mean, really tell me. Not for show or to impress people, but because I want to understand the life you've built. I'd like that, I replied. and meant it. As we walked out of Romano's steakhouse, past the celebrity photos and expensive wine displays, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years. The possibility of a genuine relationship with my family. Not one based on their approval of my choices, but one built on mutual respect for who we'd all become. My mother caught up with me as we reached the parking lot. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I've thought about you every single day for the past 15 years. I've wondered if you were happy, if you were safe, if you'd found what you were looking for. I know I don't have the right to say this after how we treated you, but I never stopped loving you." I looked at this woman who had raised me, who had taught me to read and helped me with homework and tucked me into bed, but who had also been willing to cut me out of her life when I didn't conform to her expectations. "Love isn't just a feeling, Mom," I said. "It's also a choice. And for 15 years, you chose not to love me enough to support my dreams." "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry. The question now," I continued, "is whether you're willing to choose differently going forward. Whether you can love me for who I actually am, rather than for who you think I should be." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, yes I am." 3 months later, I stood on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, suited up for my 6th space mission, a historic flight that would establish the first permanent research station on the lunar surface. As I walked toward the rocket that would carry me further from Earth than any woman had ever traveled, I carried with me a small photo that Jessica had given me at her wedding the month before. It was a picture of our family from my 8th birthday, all of us crowded around a telescope I'd received as a gift, pointing up at the stars. In the photo, my parents are smiling with genuine pride as their youngest daughter explains the constellations she'd memorized. Marcus and Jessica are listening with the attention that only children can give to something that fascinates them completely. The photo reminded me that families can change, that people can grow, and that sometimes the journey to forgiveness is as long and difficult as the journey to the stars. But it also reminded me that the most important thing I'd learned during my 15 years of isolation wasn't how to succeed without support. It was how to succeed without needing approval from anyone other than myself. As the rocket engines ignited beneath me and I began my journey to the moon, I thought about that 8-year-old girl lying on her back in suburban Cleveland, staring up at the infinite expanse of space and dreaming of touching the stars. She couldn't have imagined the price she would pay for those dreams, or how lonely the journey would be, or how much strength she would need to keep going when everyone she loved told her to give up. But she also couldn't have imagined how magnificent it would feel to finally arrive exactly where she'd always known she belonged, reaching for the stars, with or without anyone's permission. The mission was a complete success. We established the Lunar Research Station ahead of schedule, conducted groundbreaking scientific research, and laid the foundation for humanity's permanent expansion beyond Earth. When I returned from that mission, I was promoted to Director of NASA's Deep Space Exploration Program, responsible for planning humanity's next steps toward Mars and beyond. My family was there for the landing, standing in the VIP section at Kennedy Space Center, holding signs with my name and cheering as our spacecraft touched down safely. It wasn't the family I'd dreamed of having when I was 8 years old, but it was the family we'd all chosen to become, complicated, imperfect, but finally honest about who we really were. And as I stepped out of that spacecraft and felt Earth's gravity welcome me home once again, I realized that sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving other people wrong about your dreams. It's proving to yourself that your dreams were exactly the right size for the person you were meant to become. Commander Sarah Mitchell currently serves as director of NASA's Deep Space Exploration Program and holds the record for furthest distance traveled from Earth by a female astronaut. She continues to inspire the next generation of space explorers through her leadership of the Artemis program and her advocacy for making space exploration accessible to everyone who dares to dream beyond the boundaries of what others believe is possible. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.